Hello, Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching. And today we're going to speak all about the difference of the highly sensitive personality trait and autism spectrum disorder, specifically a FAD subsection of the autism spectrum disorder diagnosis called pathological demand avoidance. So if you are parenting a highly sensitive child who is struggling with their big emotions and you notice that they are hitting, kicking, screaming, melting down on a daily basis, or running away, hiding, isolating, and shutting down, then this video is for you if you're struggling to figure out what of your child's behavior is inherent to their personality and what of your child's emotional experience is due to their personality. And then what behaviors are actually atypical for your child, for children the same age, and for highly sensitive children altogether. And we'll speak about that today. Have already heard the difference between sensory processing disorder and autism. This is not the first time that I'm talking about this from a scientific standpoint, from a mental health standpoint as well. And with that being said, we're going to dive into a particular acronym, PDA, because I've mentioned it before in various recordings and trainings you've heard me say, however you're finding us, whether that be here on a podcast on today's show, or if you've watched any of our YouTube videos or been in our Facebook group. So anyways, regardless of how you're getting to this message, what we're going to talk a lot about today is how to understand the highly sensitive trait and to feel sure that you are on the right track to break any patterns of ineffective behavior without breaking the spirit of your child. And this is relevant for anyone going through the realm and trying to weed through the messaging of mental health and psychology and the medical industry compared to, for example, parenting and supporting your child and managing their big behaviors simply through your relationship with your child, especially if your child is 8th grade, US 8th grade or under, which, when we're speaking about being able to break this down, usually parents of sensitive kids have figured out that their kid fits the personality trait before they get to high school. With that being said, here at MTC, we serve the gamut. And so I'm happy to talk about this and how this shows up for teens as well. So let's dive in. Now, again, we will make sure that the show notes and links for other trainings related to understanding the personality trait and sensory processing disorder, which is different, and autism spectrum disorder, which is different as a whole, those big, larger categories. Today we're going to talk about pathological demand avoidance, which is a FAD subset of autism spectrum disorder. Now, the autistic community is really growing and making a large stand in understanding how psychology and traditional behavior management has significantly damaged the neurodivergent population of the autistic community. And so what I'm going to do today is support you as you raise your sensitive child in understanding the difference between the personality trait of sensory processing sensitivity. And I'll try to, this is such an important topic, I get passionate, and when I get passionate, I talk too fast. So I will try to make sure that this conversation is digestible for you so that you understand where your child lies, where your child fits, and what to learn more about, and how to break down those meltdown cycles in a way that honors your child and doesn't put them in a box. And does that in a way that helps you feel empowered to systematically change the behavior dynamics you see in your household. And we're going to do that in a way that helps you understand how I know what I'm talking about. So let's break that down first and foremost. Now, in this capacity and how you're hearing from me, I am a parent coach and mental health consultant. That means that I am not your child's therapist. I will never diagnose your child if we ever work together. With that being said, I am certainly qualified for a child walking into my therapy office in my group private practice, or for any of my clinicians, qualified to diagnose and to acknowledge whether or not a child fits the autism spectrum diagnosis, as a mental health field would call it right now still. Though the autistic community notices that being autistic is an identity, and that is a big shift in the autistic community that is becoming more and more present now that the internet is as thorough as it is. But still, right now in the mental health and medical industry, autism is still categorized as a disorder. So I'm going to try to acknowledge and be identity affirming for the autism community and for autistic people, and do that in a way that keeps us focused on my area of expertise, which is the highly sensitive personality trait. Now, with that being said, I do have certifications in understanding autism, and not from a behavior management standpoint. And so I have had in the past issued, if that's the right word, given the autism spectrum diagnosis for my clients, because I have specific training that I was blessed with early in my career. With that being said, most clinical therapists, whether they have a social work degree or a professional counselor degree like myself, don't diagnose autism. Typically, they refer out to a psychologist who will do a full psychological evaluation or not. They might just do a parent report and have a conversation with the child and diagnose. And they might, if you refer to a neuropsych, they would do a full neurological, psychological evaluation. And that is one option for parents to seek services with an autism spectrum diagnostic label. And with that being said, there are a select few of clinicians who feel comfortable and have the experience as well as the training to understand the diagnosis clear enough to put it on paper and put their license under it. And I happen to be one of those people because of my experience. The level of training and expertise that my supervisors held in my first position was unparalleled in my community, and the level of training was extremely thorough. And then that just compounded with the trainings that I received in the early time of my career. And so I do feel confident putting my letters after a diagnosis of that magnitude. With that being said, my experience is not typical. So we'll name it. So if you are wondering whether or not your child fits the criteria for autism spectrum disorder, it is highly likely that if you speak with a mental health professional, they will refer you to a psychologist who does psychological evaluations. A developmental pediatrician might also diagnose autism spectrum disorder, depending on how old your child is. Typically, that's more appropriate for young children. Or they would refer you to a neuropsychological evaluation. And a label of autism spectrum disorder would be most appropriately necessary for parents whose children have significant developmental delays, and you need an IEP, an individualized education plan, to ensure that your child receives significant supports in the school system so that they can meet appropriate developmental milestones on their own pace, rather than upholding your child to a developmental milestone for a neurotypical child who does not fit the criteria for autism spectrum disorder, who is not autistic, and as a result, their learning track would be different. Now, I'm going to try to stay focused on understanding that is that the autistic community is something that I stay abreast on and I learn, and it is not the expertise that I teach about here on this platform, on any of my platforms, because of the mission that we have on our hearts, which is to help parents of highly sensitive children eliminate suicidal thoughts, behaviors, and risky intentions and risky impulses, in order to eliminate suicidal thoughts and behaviors for the entire highly sensitive population. And so as a result, I have narrowed my focus to understand and help you understand the difference between autism and the highly sensitive personality trait. Now, on your journey, you might have understood or come across a label called pathological demand avoidance, and that is what we're going to talk about today. So, the highly sensitive personality trait is consistent of 4 components, and I will briefly overview those here, because you can absolutely hear me spend half an hour or more breaking those down for the entirety of a show, and so I'm not going to do that here. But the 4 components are depth of processing, and that is for emotions and thinking. Easily overstimulated, that is based on the vulnerabilities that your child is experiencing in that day, and also the emotional sensitivities that they have. Emotionally responsiveness and high empathy. And you can see those counteract each other at times, where a child is not able to demonstrate their empathy and act on their empathy if they are emotionally reactive in their responsivity. And then also sensitive to subtleties. And so when you hear all of these things, and sensitive to subtleties could be sensory intensity, like an itchy sweater, right? And that kind of being the straw that breaks the camel's back for your child's intense emotions of the day. But tomorrow they're fine wearing the sweater because it's got a unicorn on it and they love unicorns, and your kiddo's just thrilled about it, right? So it's not about the sweater. That's the sensitive to subtleties thing. Or you change your tone and your child struggles and has a meltdown as a result because they hear that slight intonation of exasperation in your voice, even if you didn't mean to. You were just tired that day. And so again, the sensitivity to subtleties doesn't have to be a sensory intensity, whereas typically those in the autistic community have consistent and specific sensory intensities that are also available to be noticed in terms of consistency for children with sensory processing disorder. And that's also another disorder that we're not going to tease apart today, because I've done a video on this, understanding the difference between autism and sensory processing disorder and sensory processing sensitivity. So when we look at pathological demand avoidance specifically, this subset can really trip you up, because when you look at the intensity of a label of PDA, we'll use that for short, not the fun kind, and I say that tongue-in-cheek, but also seriously, because pathological demand avoidance, PDA, has quite a damning label for children. And I'm going to say that with definitiveness. I try not to curse these days, and I can't see a way around it with this personality trait being mislabeled as PDA. And so we're going to cover that clearly today, because when those who have the behaviors that we talk about, you've heard me say over and over again, every time, the intense daily emotional outbursts, meltdowns, sensitivities, and major behaviors that your child or teen is experiencing, all of those are symptoms of the root problem that your child is stuck in shame, doesn't know how to manage their emotions, accept themselves for who they are, and doesn't feel understood, held, cared for, and guided effectively and efficiently by their parents. And I know that I hope that you hear me when I say that. There's no judgment behind those words. It is simply a mismatch in parenting. And when we understand that at its core, it is much more effective to instill hope for you, and also systematically for our clients to get the results of eliminating that daily meltdown or shutdown cycle. And whether that be for the parents that we work with directly for kids 8th grade and under, or we're working directly with teens and seeing that consistency for the teens and the parents together. And so my objective here is to help you clearly understand both tracks of understanding how a child gets to this big meltdown intensity, and then allowing you to, or inviting you, I don't allow you to do anything, you allow yourself to do whatever you want, inviting you to make a decision for yourself. Because the first and foremost understanding is to notice the pathological demand avoidance, though following a medical model, a psychology model of the labeling a child with from a deficit of who they might be, is not actually recognized in the mental health industry documentation. There is no such thing as pathological demand avoidance in the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual that is used to bill insurance, that is used for hospital systems to communicate, that is used for mental health providers to communicate with each other. Okay, so it's really important. I use the word fad for a reason, because this track of understanding major behaviors that we've just discussed is misinformed and significantly lacking a ton of information on parenting sensitive children, how we eliminate these major behaviors consistently, efficiently, and effectively, and respectfully. And to do that in a way that is loving, kind, playful, and actually creates an environment where you value your child's needs, understand them better, and help your child feel like they can be their best self and that they can live a meaningful life worth living. And PDA simply doesn't do that. And there are pretty significant gaps in the understanding of a child and how children develop when we use a label like PDA. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. That's the passion that I have around the internet and how you might be going down a rabbit hole that significantly damages your relationship with your child. And I'm here to take a stand for that, because what that does is it actually perpetuates ineffective behavior for your child, for your whole family, and fosters not just struggle, but pain in your household. And I am not here to allow that to keep happening in our community, in our country, in the world. Right? So we're going to talk about this from an understanding of the international spread of the use of PDA as a fad label and how this is damaging children. And I'm going to use that language because there's no way to sugarcoat it. This is significantly damaging to understanding the child's brain and child development, and it does nothing for the autistic community, nothing, and nothing good, I should say. And so, with that being said, I'm going to take a stand on that, even though this is, this platform isn't to educate or to serve particularly the autistic community. With that being said, if I know something about something and there's something going wrong in the world and it puts another community down, I'm not going to stand for that either, especially if it's semi-related to the community that we serve here at MTC. And so that's what we're going to do here today. So all of that to notice the understanding of the criteria for autism spectrum disorder. As I mentioned before, in the mental health world, that is not something we'll dive in today, but I will cover PDA, okay? So let's talk about the history. Now, you've heard me say that the highly sensitive personality trait, also known as SPS, that's what we're going to call it here today to make sure that we're speaking scientifically today. Sensory processing sensitivity was coined by Elaine Aron in the 1990s. With that being said, the personality trait that humans are born sensitive was learned about in the 60s and published about in the mental health world in the 70s by Marsha Linehan. It just wasn't named that. And Marsha Linehan developed a treatment called dialectical behavior therapy that I'm trained in to support sensitive people who developed chronically suicidal and self-harmful behaviors. So ineffective behaviors, right? Major behaviors that we help prevent here at MTC. For families around the world, we've helped hundreds of families prevent these major behaviors and eliminate the initial signs of those major behaviors in their family dynamic. And so I'd like to think that I have something to say about this stuff, and I've seen how this can be changed consistently for families around the world. And so when we look at the track of pathological demand avoidance and where that track of understanding the child's major behaviors of refusing, as they call it, refusing demands, avoiding demands like brushing teeth, getting ready in the morning, going to school, all of that. Elizabeth Newson in 2003 coined this term, pathological demand avoidance, and she's a clinical psychologist in the UK, and she put it in a subset of autism spectrum disorder. With that being said, it's very important that we understand the cultural context of the mental health system in the UK to understand how far behind the UK mental health system is to the United States system. And this is no knock on, I mean, like I said, we work with families internationally. We have clients in the UK, we have clients in Europe, we have clients in many countries, Israel, Australia, etc. So Canada, around the world, and even in North America. And so with that being said, there's no knock on where you're coming from and how you're listening to us and how you get here. And it's also true that if your country's mental health system is behind, and I'm here learning from my country that is ahead, then we should do something. We should understand a little bit more about whether or not us in the United States and we're here, whether or not we should put the understanding of child development on level playing field with the understanding of the highly sensitive personality trait, right? Doesn't that make sense? Say, for example, let's take a medical example for this, right? If a medical illness like smallpox, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of controversial for me to talk about right now, given the climate, living in a pandemic, right? But here in the US, we have an understanding of how to eradicate smallpox. And if there was a subset of smallpox in another country that hadn't yet eradicated it, where they were trying to treat it in a way that was less effective than how we treat it here in our country, then people heard about the subset of smallpox in our country, and we started to use that country's treatment of smallpox to treat an outbreak of smallpox in our country. We would be, it'd be all over the news. Hey, we have a cure for this. We figured it out, right? Like, we know how to eradicate this and how to isolate the population and eradicate this intensity. Now, I'm not talking about eradicating the highly sensitive personality trait at all. What I'm talking about is being able to eliminate suicidal thoughts for sensitive people. Why do suicidal thoughts happen? Why do risky behaviors happen? Because you think that your life is better non-existent, right? There's a clear invalidating and dishonoring experience that our highly sensitive children are having day in and day out. And that's what's leading to an epidemic of sensitive kids in therapy more often than non-highly sensitive kids, and suicidal more often than non-highly sensitive kids. That's what I'm talking about eradicating, not your child's sensitivity. So let's make sure that we're clear on that. And so right, logic, like, let's compare apples to apples, right? Apples to apples, the mental health stigma in the UK is significantly behind the mental health stigma in the United States as a whole. Now, obviously, there are many pockets of mental health stigma in the United States. We are still working on helping people be okay with seeking mental health support, with seeking parenting support, right, which is the avenue that we're talking to prevent childhood mental health disorders and track it on early, right? Compared to just seeing that kids will be kids, saying that kids will be kids, and saying that everything will be fine and children are fine even if they think that they want to die, or they're engaging in risky behaviors and they're explosive at home because a parent doesn't want their child not only to get a label, but seeking support as a weakness, right? That's the biggest thing. That's the main core of a stigma, is seeking support as not just a burden on other people, but a weakness in your own character. Okay, and highly sensitive people are not weak. And you, as parents trying to eliminate this this massive meltdown behavior, you're not weak either. You've been trying, right? And so when we look at the whole of the mental health stigma, and part of that, a key component of the mental health stigma in either country, UK or the US, is in thinking that a child's behavior is just that. It's just from their behavior. You're either a bad kid or a good kid based on your behavior. Maybe you're a little bit bad, maybe you're a little bit good. But if we just look at behavior and we label it as bad or good, then it's a lot easier to say you don't need help, you're just a bad person, and so you shouldn't get that help and all that, right? And that's what stigma does. It tells you that you're weak, you're bad, you're wrong, there's something broken with you, and inherently terrible. And as a result, you should be ashamed and you should hide it. Okay? So the UK and there are organizations in the UK that are working very tirelessly to break that mental health stigma and to bring to an understanding of what is effective mental health treatment, and to get research moving and improve the mental health understanding, and to learn from a country that has done a lot of work in this area, like the United States, to raise the bar in what's appropriate. And it's also true that the facts are the facts, and as the time of this recording, the UK has a much more behaviorally, medically minded stigma around mental health. And so when we understand that this psychologist, who is coming from the UK in 2003, is labeling these major ineffective behaviors like melting down, hitting, kicking, screaming, and saying that your child is refusing to follow through on typical life requirements, and we grab onto that and say, yes, this is new information. This is cutting edge information that my child should hear. Really, what we're doing is we're taking old information from a less sophisticated understanding of mental health, and because it's new to our country, we're thinking it's cutting edge, and we're thinking that it actually honors the autistic community. And so you as a parent can go down a giant rabbit hole with this quote unquote newfangled idea, and can set yourself up for major challenge in trying to figure out, okay, what treatment would be appropriate for my child who now fits this PDA new subset, right? This is the danger of following advice from behaviorally minded and medically modeled minded mental health professionals. That's specific related to following the medical profession, including pediatricians, who are often, and by often I say it is an anomaly and a rare for a pediatrician to truly understand that a child and their development is, and if their child is not developing effectively to the point where their emotions are safely communicated, then that's a child development and behavior communication problem, not a behavior problem that needs to be modified with rewards, timeouts, and shaking your hand and no on that behavior and ignored, right? So the medical model treats the behavior as the problem, right? And so people with a PDA, children with a PDA label, would be followed down that track, because that's just the way that the medical community thinks. There's a problem in front of me, the arm is bleeding, I stop the bleeding. What do? I figure out where the bleeding's coming from and I sew it up. But I don't really ask how the person got cut in the first place, aside from just saying, hey, don't go, playing with saws, right? But the child first understanding looks at a deeper in a deeper picture. And when we respect a child's big, intense behaviors and understand that that's because of a skill gap, they don't know how to skillfully communicate their needs in a way that actually gets their needs met, right? Then we can truly understand why a child is behaving in a specific way, and we can eliminate the root cause of that. And that's the work that we do here at MTC. So when we help our clients do that, we help parents understand that the intense behaviors that your child is experiencing is not because your child wants to manipulate you, not because your child even knows how to manipulate you. But when we read what Newman talks about, Elizabeth Newman, and in her label and all of her published studies, she studied 150 children over the course of 25 years, so from 1975 to 2000, and then she published her work in 2003, stopped her research in 2000, how she coined the term. Her study of 150 people, 150 kids, studied with the lens in the 70s of behavior is just that, something to be fixed, something to be eliminated. And so she put her label of PDA under the subset of autism from the understanding that autism is a behavior that needs to be fixed. Now, the autistic community has made massive strides to understand the difference between how an autistic brain works compared to how a neurotypical non-autistic brain works, and noticing that neither are wrong or broken, and there's no right either. And so when you understand that from a core difference, then we're not working on helping autistic people become less autistic. We're helping their major behaviors become less intense. And with that being said, for highly sensitive people to be mislabeled with PDA, then you run a significant risk of missing the fact that your child's nervous system and brain is wired differently. And so you're holding your child to the standard of a non-highly sensitive person, like me. And when that happens, and maybe even like you as a parent, if you're not highly sensitive, when that happens, you look at your child like they're broken, and that until they become more like you, they will stay broken, and they will stay stuck, weak, and struggling. And man, as a parent myself, that's a hard pill to swallow, isn't it? To look at your child and think that they have core deficits because they're not like you, because they're not like 80% of the population. So there's a lot to this PDA label that just doesn't really sit well, and you need to listen to that gut, even if you don't have a master's degree in this and over 10 years of experience and a wealth of highly specialized experience just by fate, in terms of my professional background. And with that being said, we got to look at the history. So let me go back to this, okay? Newman described PDA and coined it in 2000, 10 years after the highly sensitive trait was named in the United States. So she was late to the party, and she didn't understand the personality trait. And so as a result, a cultural fad in the UK festered under the guise of looking at these major behaviors as deficits in personality, without the information that is now growing, and actually more research is being done in the UK on the highly sensitive personality trait than in the United States right now, given what's being published right now. Now, I don't know all the people who are researching who haven't published yet, but there are many research projects happening right now in the UK on the highly sensitive personality trait. And so 10 years after, right, and 30 years after sensitivity, as I mentioned before with Marsha Linehan's research, after sensitivity was studied and published in the mental health field as a personality trait without a name. Okay, Marsha Linehan said some people are more sensitive, and that is something she put in her research, and she discovered in her research, and she's done double-blind studies and was hired by the NIH to create the only, NIH and SAMHSA, to create the only evidence-based treatment to eliminate the hardest mental health diagnosis to treat, the behaviors of the hardest mental health diagnosis to treat, which is which is borderline personality disorder, combined with the hardest substance abuse diagnosis to treat, which is heroin addiction. And so people with borderline personality disorder and who are also addicted to heroin received treatment by Marsha Linehan. She was commissioned again because she was the only one who had created a treatment protocol that was working to relieve chronic suicidality and self-harm for borderline personality disordered clients with this BPD personality trait diagnosis. And so they said, hey, maybe she can help us address those particular clients who had the lowest success rate in substance abuse treatment for heroin addiction. And guess what? What do you know? She actually freaking did it. Excuse my French. I just love that. She did it. And it's called DBT SUD for substance use disorders. And I happen to have training in that. And so with that being said, in learning that 6-7 years ago, I don't know, I can't remember. I just doubled down in the clear understanding that the highly sensitive personality trait is not a damned trait. It is not something that your child needs to look at as a weakness. It does not lead to an inevitable result. With that being said, Newman, you read her research, you follow the research of people who followed her coin. There is no treatment protocol to eliminate the symptoms of what one would call pathological demand avoidance. Nothing's in the research. There are, however, current proposed research articles that discuss how controversial the label is itself. So, I have yet to come across any articles about how the highly sensitive personality trait, sensory processing sensitivity, is controversial. With that being said, there are plenty of people who don't understand sensory processing sensitivity and will call it quote unquote autism light, which is a whole lot of baloney. And that's why we're here talking today, because if you don't understand the personality trait, then you will attribute some of the ineffective behavior responses of a highly sensitive child as similar to the autistic personality, and into the way an autistic person thinks and operates in the world and experiences the world as well. So let's get back to understanding PDA. Okay, so we have the history. We have the fact that there were parallel research projects going on, and in the United States, Linehan and Elaine Aron learned of each other. Elaine Aron understands that DBT is effective for helping highly sensitive people who have developed borderline personality disorder eliminate the ineffective behavior. So Elaine Aron honors and respects the even more specialized treatment of DBT, because there's parallel and support and validation that some people are born sensitive, and it doesn't put sensitive people in a place of lesser than, right? That's really important, because when we look at those three parallel tracks of research being done around the same time, if two of them agree with each other and understand that one is more due to one research track is due to the extreme intensity of the behavior, right? Then we're able to make a much different conclusion, draw to a much different conclusion around the validity of PDA. Okay, so when we understand this, right? Being highly sensitive with ineffective behaviors for a child, it is much easier to help parents understand the personality trait, break down the symptoms of shame, support your child in being able to playfully acknowledge that emotions are typical, normal, and A-OK. Help you stay out of the way of judging your child, but also understanding expectations in a way where you're not making things worse. And again, no judgment. We help our clients do this all the time. And there's nothing wrong with you. You just have a different perspective of how to lead your child. And traditional parenting can't be it. And then lastly, being able to do this in a systematic way so that your child doesn't feel like everything's wrong and that they're broken, right? And that in and of itself not only eliminates the daily meltdowns, because like I said, we've helped hundreds of families do the same thing, and also helps highly sensitive children thrive and no longer not only exhibit those ineffective behaviors, which as a result means they wouldn't fit the criteria anymore of PDA, but also helps your highly sensitive child thrive beyond non-highly sensitive people. And that's what Lewis's research speaks about in the sense of understanding the bell curve, that highly sensitive kids who grow up in an invalidating environment grow up on the lower side of a bell curve in terms of 3% or three standard deviations away from the norm in terms of ineffective behaviors and atypical behaviors, and highly sensitive kids actually swing to the other end, 2 to 3 standard deviations above the norm in their behaviors, their performance, their academic success, and their emotional security. And that is science. And that is what highly sensitive kids benefit from and are capable of when we change the parent-child dynamic. And this is again found in all sorts of research around highly sensitive people. Now, research around PDA speaks of none of that. Says that a meltdown can be categorized by a parent's report as a scream, a tantrum, a hit, or a kick, and also names meltdowns and PDA type behaviors, criteria in the measure that they use as quote unquote outrageous or shocking behavior to get out of doing something. Now, what does that scream of? That screams of manipulation, that your child does not have the skill to not only get their needs met effectively, right? We know that, but also that your child wants to not do anything in life. Wait a minute. What child was put on this earth to be miserable? None. What child was put on this earth to be lazy bum? None. Right? That's not how we're wired. No child is wired like this. Children are wired to feel capable, to feel loved, to understand that they can accomplish their goals, and that they have a hard time doing that. And that's up to us as parents to raise them effectively, not as mental health providers to say, "Oh, tough nuts. That's just is what it is." Might as well give them a sticker chart. Tell them that they're being a bad kid and they'll only be a good kid if they do what we want them to. Man, that is just not going to work out, right? That is just not going to work out. We have seen countless times, again and again and again, that behavior modification, sticker charts, timeouts, and shaming children by lecturing them and removing privileges that are over the top, groundings, sending your child to your room, holding the door, all of those behaviors from a parent to try to modify behavior from a child not only are invalidating and help your child feel less than themselves, not just less than you as an adult, but less than themselves, dishonors the child's ability to feel capable, but also perpetuates the behavior and makes it worse. And yet, when you look at the typical quote-unquote treatment protocol for PDA, it's behavior modification. Stuff that I just named doesn't work. And we see countless adults in the autistic community right now, specifically over the last several years, speaking out about the trauma that ABA work impacted for them. And now as adults, how they were able to recover from behavior modification treatment and needing countless years of therapy to do that. And so when we hear, even from the adult autistic community, that quote unquote research evidence-based treatment protocol is damaging, and didn't actually do anything effective. And then we use that same illogical definition of treatment to bring outdated old labels to life in our current culture because you haven't heard about it. So maybe that means it's new and something to learn about. Then we are doing our children a disservice. And I encourage you, if you haven't already, listen to my show on ABA and PCIT and other behavior modification like 1, 2, 3 magic, timeouts, anything like that. Because those treatment modalities are stifling your child's voice, suffering them in stamping out their spirit, and is perpetuating the problem that you are here to solve, which is to eliminate that meltdown cycle. And what works for parenting highly sensitive kids is improving your relationship with your child so that they feel heard, welcomed, and understood, no matter the ineffective behavior that they have, so that you can teach them effective behavior. And that has to be done playfully, not by ignoring their behavior. That has to be done in a way that you feel empowered, so you don't get angry when you're tired and frustrated and exhausted. So that you feel calm, cool, collected, and capable consistently, not because you're holding your lid on a boiling pot, but because you know and you trust that what you're doing is helping your child grow and flourish, rather than just snuffing out a misdirected passion, right? Because if a child is given a label of pathological, right, what is that? Antisocial, broken, wrong. Look up the word. Demand avoidance. What I hear is, that kid's clever. That kid's passionate. That kid has a mission for themselves. That kid has an unmet need or needs, and needs to be able to be redirected in a way that helps them see that that is a skill set that needs to be flourished in a way that helps them become president of the United States rather than the president of a prison gang. And having worked with juvenile offenders in my career and being able to see how struggling teens can stay in this pattern or break out of it, there's a clear difference in being able to reach a child who has been constantly disrespected by adults and constantly dishonored and constantly labeled as a bad kid, and not being able to do that. And you know what it is? It's a core understanding and a core communication of, I see you. I know you feel like crap. I know you don't want to feel like this anymore. And I'm here to help you get out of this pattern that you have. And when serving children in the juvenile justice system, myself, my team members, we were able to impact these teens in a positive way by honoring the fact that they're humans, honoring the fact that they don't want to try to skirt around the rules because they don't value them. It's because they haven't felt valued themselves. And so when we take that experience and that understanding from a professional standpoint, and we help you raising your 6-year-old, your 7-year-old, your 8-year-old who happens to be lying to you because they're worried and nervous about getting in trouble, and helping you lead them in a way that they tell you the truth, not because you had to pry it out of them or threaten to take away privileges because that's all you thought you had as a skill set, but that they are able to spontaneously share with you that they messed up and that they know they can do better and they know you'll help them do better. That is what eliminates risky behaviors for highly sensitive kids into highly sensitive adults around the world. That's what MTC is here to do. That's what we are here to do to break out of this pattern. And that is what's possible for your particular family now. You don't have to wait to see whether or not your teen will be motivated to live a different life in 5 years. You can change this dynamic now. And you can do it by clearly identifying your child's behavior, not as oppositional, not as defiant, not as manipulative, not as antisocial, but as an unmet need. And that their emotional intensity is okay, but their behavioral intensity is unsafe, and that's what needs to be changed. So they can communicate their emotional intensity, and as a result, decrease their emotional intensity. They no longer have to scream from the rooftops in an ineffective way. If you're ready to break out of this pattern and you want our help to see if we can help you fix it, then I encourage you to book a call. Go ahead to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk. You'll get on the phone with one of our team members. And on that call, we will have a conversation about whether or not what you're struggling with and what goals you have is a gap that we can bridge between one and the other. If that's the case, then we'll share with you on that same phone call how to break out of this pattern and how to get started right away. Otherwise, if we know that you happen to find us and resonate, but what we do isn't what you need, we will tell you exactly how to find resources, whether that be in your local community or internationally in your community, with a different expert to help you break out of this pattern. And that, my friends, is exactly why we offer this call for free. Because if anything else, even if your child does fit the criteria for being autistic and is autistic, we know how to help you honor your child's personality, how to honor your child's neurodivergence, and how to do that in a way that also helps them make safe decisions with their behavior. And we have a network of experts that do that consistently, that doesn't label them as broken, wrong, malfunctioning, or dysfunctional. Okay? And so that is critical for our mission here, that we work with people who know exactly who we are, what we do, and you're a perfect fit for us. And that requires a phone call. Not only is trust built in a conversation, but it's also your needs are assessed in a conversation. And that's why we do what we do and how we have those results. And with that being said, we need to make sure, and it's on our hearts, that we make sure that anybody comes our way is steered in the right direction, so that you understand what will be helpful and what will be harmful. And so we look forward to having that conversation with you. We are honored to have that conversation with you, and we look forward to having that soon. Because there's no time like the present to break out of feeling like anybody in your family is broken. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.